Being a competitive game, the popularity of a champion in League is closely correlated to their practical efficiency. The natural motivation when playing ranked is to try to win more games than you lose. Therefore, it's in your best interest to prioritize picks that statistically have a higher chance of achieving that outcome. I understand win rate statistics are largely inconsequential since you have to know how to play the champion, but whenever someone ends up with like a 54% win rate, there's a pretty good chance they'll have an elevated success rate when playing them. Correspondingly, champions that overperform get played more often, while those who underperform tend to get played less often. In spite of that, there's a number of champions in League that no matter what the meta or their win rate or whatever, consistently find a pick rate in the high single digits to even up to 14 to 15% all year round. I've covered a few of them individually in my Why Everyone Plays series, but I wanted to talk about always popular champions collectively in today's video because there are a number of similarities among all of them regardless of their class or role that are worth documenting. So let's get started. League is one of the few competitive games out there that extensively documents and records the performances of champions, so much so that there must be upwards of a dozen websites aggregating data on every possible metric in the game. You have OPGG, UGG, Lolalytics, etc. They even go so far as to make third-party apps like Professor, Mobalytics, what have you, that give you endless amounts of information on how well a champion is doing. GoldGG also tracks pro play statistics. Essentially, every single aspect of this game gets tracked. League of Grass even measures down a team's chances of winning based on what combination of dragons they get. Thoroughness would be an understatement. With all this data given to us and the sheer sample size of games, any player worth their salt would be severely kneecapping themselves by not using it as a point of reference, and that in and of itself has influence on player decision making. If people see a champion with a 55% win rate and a 10% pick rate, even if they themselves have never confronted that champion, they might just take the stats at face value and target ban them. Taking these two factors, a player's desire to win and advance in rank and the extensive and exhaustive access to champion data and statistics, if we exclude personal enjoyment and mastery, logically why wouldn't people just pick the ones with the highest win rate? It's because there's one metric that people value more than any amount of data can measure up to, and it's also the one metric that can't really be physically quantified: agency. Agency denotes your ability to change or influence the outcome of something. For example, if someone's being a jerk to you in game, you have agency in the situation by muting them. In the context of the game itself, if the enemy Lulu is getting a little too comfortable harassing you from a distance, you as a Blitzcrank player can yank her into your team and punish her for doing so. On a broader scale, agency is often associated with pressure. Are you able to exert pressure on the map and influence the game to bring you and your team a victory? It's this metric that leads to some champions being consistently popular throughout the player base, even if all data points to them being a supposed bad champion in the current metagame. Quite a few of League's most popular picks ironically have poor win rates too. One of the game's most consistently popular marksmen, Ezreal, has almost never had a 50% win rate or higher, and yet historically he's almost always had a double-digit pick rate, or in many instances a 20 to 30% pick rate. It all ties back to the agency he and the others have. An easy way to explain would be to actually go over champions who are consistently unpopular, as there's a lot more of them than there are popular ones. For comparison's sake, let's talk about Kog'Maw. Kog'Maw has perennially suffered from lackluster participation despite empirically being one of the highest win rate ADCs in the game. Why exactly is that? As I'm sure you're aware, Kog'Maw is regarded by many to be the machine gun ADC, capable of outputting extreme amounts of damage by way of his penchant for on-hit effects. He can extend his attack range to an amount far exceeding most other marksmen, and with each attack applying on-hit effects, not the least of which being his own % max health damage, he's able to shred through enemy teams at record time. The caveat is that he's also one of the most vulnerable marksmen in the game, lacking any escape or defensive options of any kind. The only thing he can do in his own power is control space through Voidus, but in the era of hypermobility we're in, that's kind of a moot point. As such, Kog'Maw is extremely dependent on his teammates to compensate for his inability to move around very quickly or protect himself. So even though he can potentially out-DPS the majority of other marksmen in the game, experientially Kog'Maw has more agency on account of there being numerous things the player has little control over. For every one game where they get to myrtleize the enemy team, there are 9 games where they get ran over by the jungler or the enemy assassin and explode. Relying on 4 random players to make up for something you're missing doesn't make for a tenable climbing strategy. Too much of Kog'Maw's performance hinges on circumstances that are out of your control. The only reason he has a high win rate is because people only play him when it's an easy win, or they're just so good at Kog'Maw that they're the exception to the statistic, not the rule. How does Ezreal compare in this regard? For one, he's one of the highest agency marksmen in the game, and it's all thanks to the way in which he's designed. Being the emblematic example of skill shots in this game, Ezreal's main way of attacking is dealing damage through Mystic Shot, doubling as a long-range empowered basic attack due to its ability to apply on-hit effects and on-attack effects. The extremely long distance coverage of his Q and W afford him one of the widest threat ranges in the game, even among his peers, not to mention the consistent output he contributes. It's the generous safety margin Ezreal has that addresses the most important question governing agency in League. Can I do something? Ezreal's extensive tenure dating all the way back from his release to now is due in part to him always being able to do something no matter what the situation. Long-range physical attacks ensure he's able to pose a constant threat to the enemy team since no one wants to just stand there and take a bunch of damage. Just his presence alone gives his team a strong neutral game. The scaling of Mystic Shot combined with items like Triforce make it so every Q will chunk you for a couple hundred damage, and if your team doesn't have a tank or a modicum of sustain, eventually he can push you guys back and give his team the freedom to advance. At 1200 units, even champions at the dash will have trouble getting in range of him. With most combat mobility tools only offering 600 to 800 units of distance, you would need to commit most of your resources just to get within striking range of him as a melee. To an extent, even ranged champions have to find a way to get close to him. Ordinarily, those of the wide pressure range have only that to fall back on, meaning if the enemy team can close the distance, neutral-focused champions can't do a whole lot to bail themselves out. Ezreal, however, can thanks to Arcane Shift, essentially being flashed on a basic ability. Long-distance combat in tandem with a way to escape immediate pressure offers him not only a strong safety margin but a way for him to always contribute something to the situation. People like having the ability to do something, especially ADC mains. Ezreal was popular for so long for that very purpose. When looking through any champion belonging to this category, you can find some semblance of persistent agency amongst all of them. Up in top lane, you have champions like Renekton, Aatrox, and Darius, common staple encounters every top laner should be prepared for. What makes them so popular? To start, they have a strong laning phase. Each of them gets hard countered in one way or another, but generally speaking, they're not as prone to getting screwed over in lane compared to most others. Then when transitioning into the mid game, that's when they can really start doing stuff. Each of them can serve as a raid boss, wherein you have to focus them down, or else they can and will eventually rip through your team. But by focusing them down, that makes it harder for you to go after the rest of their team. Renekton's ability to 100 to 0 a target with a stun makes it so even if he explodes, he gets to take someone down with him. Darius having built-in % armor penetration and getting a mountain of AD from his passive means you have to respect a full stack Darius no matter how far ahead or behind he is. Aatrox's strong battle healing and area-wide disruption make him a sizable threat through sheer base damage alone, high enough to allow him to easily destroy squishy enemy backlines with a couple sweet spot Qs. Much like how Ezreal can avoid enemy pressure while comfortably exerting his own, the three aforementioned top laners have a consistent means of applying pressure in addition to responding to pressure, giving them a stable pick rate all year round. Jungle has a number of these as well. The two obvious examples in particular would no doubt be Lee Sin and Viego. Lee Sin's one of the most consistently popular champions in League of Legends history because he has everything a jungler would be expected to have. Being a strong early game pick is alone half the battle. What a jungler can accomplish in the early game has immense bearing on how the mid to late game plays out. Applicably speaking, Lee Sin has 2 free target dashes, giving him a multitude of ways to gank all 3 lanes without the enemy laner having to be overextended. He has a respectable clear thanks to Tempest doing strong AoE damage and Iron Will giving sustain, and he has enough base damage to reliably take on most other junglers in skirmishes. Though Lee Sin does eventually fall off in the late game, his high tempo in concert with his trademark ultimate always gives him something to do, by extension always giving the person playing him a feeling of agency in affecting how the game plays out. Viego's actually popular for the opposite reason. He's not the most imposing early gamer, and his ganks are not game-changing, but what he does have is the ability to turn the enemy team's own power against them, a trait that can be exercised while ahead or behind. If he's ahead, sniping out enemies one by one adds more fuel to his already overwhelming advantage state, letting him add the enemy team's power to his own. Meanwhile, if he's behind, he can compensate for what he lacks by stealing the enemy team's power instead, effectively implying he's always going to be a threat no matter what. Even his base kit makes him a fairly strong duelist. Passive current health damage on his Q and rapid on-hit effect application gives him fantastic dueling power. Further, the execution on Heartbreaker necessitates that you be careful dying around him even if he's the weakest member on the enemy team. Viego can always find a way back into the game when he's doing poorly, and when he's doing well he can basically mess around limit testing. Mid lane tends to fluctuate a lot more, but by this point you should be able to notice the trend here. 2 examples we're talking about are Sylas and Yone. In the case of Sylas, the situation very much resembles that of Viego's. Being able to steal enemy ultimates and use them as his own opens up the door for countless different roles he can take. If they have a Nautilus or Malphite on his team, Sylas can be the engager. If there's a Taric or Kindred, Sylas can pull off a clutch teamfight save in mid to late game. If there's a Pantheon or Twisted Fate, Sylas now has a global teleport to go anywhere he wants. If there's a Tryndamere or Alistar, Sylas can frontline for his team. If even one champion on the enemy team has a worthwhile ultimate for him to steal, Sylas will always have the agency to do something for his team. In some cases, he can even use the ultimate he steals better than the original owner can. For instance, any ultimate that has a high AP ratio but its owner isn't known to build AP like Hecarim or Nessus. Similarly to Viego, his base kit's also quite practical. Being a rushdown champion with 2 gap closers and all of his attacks having strong AP scaling makes it so the enemy backline still has to anticipate the possibility of a Sylas blitzing them and taking them down with him. If that team happens to consist of many worthwhile ultimates, Sylas will always be a threat. Turning the enemy's strength against them is something few in this game can remotely do. Then we have the bane of my existence. Yone might be the prime example of an always popular champion. Man has like a 46% win rate at the moment, which by most people's standards would make him complete garbage, and yet he still is one of the most played mid laners in the game. Granted, he's played top and mid, so that's kind of misleading, but overall people enjoy playing Yone, and it's not hard to see why. Some of the highest DPS scaling in the game by virtue of getting full crit chance and the power spike attached to it with a mere 2 items. He can also tap into on-hit effects and the benefits that come with that, like Blade of the Ruined King. Having 3 dashes, 2 of which carry AoE knockups, grant him both backline access and teamfight pressure, affording him plenty of freedom to do stupid stuff in the mid to late game. People like playing him for the simple reason that he's always able to do something. Even if he runs it down early game, through his combination of high late game scaling and playmaking potential, he can assuredly still pull something off. As you can see, all these champions can do stuff at a bare minimum level, or they have access to an alternate win condition to pursue, even if it doesn't always translate to a path to victory and may even do more harm than good to the player by choosing to pick the champion in question despite statistically being subpar. What matters more to people than win rates or stats is agency, or at the very least the feeling of agency, the feeling that you can do something or work towards something that people go after. For almost any champion with a year-long pick rate of like 7% or higher, you hear them being characterized by the same things. The 4 horsewomen of top lane all have good playmaking potential, high adaptability, fantastic solo carry ability courtesy of their ability to make plays around the map, alternative win conditions to go for, and a decently strong laning phase. Mid laners like Zen, Ahri, Sylas, Yasuo, they get picked a lot for having the agency of taking matters into their own hands and a consistent baseline of strength. AD carries like Kai'Sa, Jhin, Jinx, Ezreal. For the likes of Kai'Sa, she's got that 1v9 playmaking potential through her hybrid damage, percent missing health damage, long range dash, and fast repositioning. Jhin and Ezreal can play back and fire from people from a long distance. Jinx can fall behind super early but hyper snowball in the late game off a single kill. Supports like Nami, Lulu, Thresh, and Nautilus carry utility and/or crowd control indispensable just by their very functionality. In their case, they have multiple of them. Some champions might be able to excel in certain aspects that lead to a higher win rate overall. For instance, up in top lane, Warwick is one of the most broken cheese picks of all time, but it never catches mainstream attention and usage because whenever the cheese doesn't work, you feel way more useless than if you just picked a conventional top laner. In essence, always popular champions are constantly played quite literally due to copium, like actually copium. The feeling that you can always do something whether or not it actually is reality. People insta-lock first time Zen when autofilled mid because the prospect of living out that fantasy of styling all over people, dip dive duck dodging around one-shotting everyone is so addictive people go for that even though they can realistically achieve more success playing a simple mid laner like Annie or Malzahar and being a stun bot. Above all else though, the champions are fun to play, and I suppose ultimately no amount of wins can measure up to just enjoying the game. What stops the game from being fun is frustration, and what causes frustration is loss of agency, so even if it means losing more than you win, having agency is what matters most. What do you guys think about always popular champions? Do you agree or disagree with my points? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. That'll be all for today, so if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you'd like to like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other champion discussion videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.